You're walking home on a dark night when suddenly you spot a girl on top of a building. Without warning, she jumps toward you, catching you by surprise and leaving you scared, not understanding what's happening. In the blink of an eye, she immobilizes you, and that's when you realize she has fangs like a vampire. Before you can react, she bites your neck, causing an intense pain that makes you think this is the end. However, when looking at your face, she stops instantly. Not fully understanding why, she starts to smile and asks if you want to die or become like her. Scared and not knowing what to say, she lets out an intriguing laugh and walks away, leaving you perplexed on the spot. We go back in time to the morning of that same day, when our hero, named Makoto, was at school. He's that insecure student, often labeled as a failure by his classmates. He's bullied by the class bully and is forced to buy snacks for them. In a rant, his friend expresses outrage at the injustice of the situation, even saying that the bullies deserved a horrible fate like death. While his friend helped carry the snacks, he subtly draws attention to two beautiful girls approaching on the stairs. Casually, they decide to observe the girls' legs for a moment. Later, at home, his family hears on the news about a 42-year-old man who was brutally attacked near their neighborhood, resulting in his hospitalization and subsequent tragic death. The atmosphere becomes heavy when the protagonist's family starts making comparisons between him and his older brother, saying that his brother was already in college and knew what he wanted in life. This further exacerbates his feelings of defeat. Faced with the uncomfortable comments, he decides to retreat to his room to study. Upon arriving there, the protagonist's mind returns to the girl's legs that cross the stairs, leading him to make an impulsive decision, typical of adolescence. Moved by this memory, he decides to perform an activity that young people enjoy so much. Shortly after, he decides it's time to return a DVD he had rented. His mother tells him it's late and suggests leaving that task for the next day. However, he, being a stubborn boy, chooses to go alone without the company of his older brother. Mounted on his bicycle, he travels the cold and dark streets of the city. As he approaches the neighborhood where the incident with the guy on television occurred, his eyes come across a female figure on top of a building. Intrigued, he finds the situation suspicious, but before he can show any reaction, she jumps toward him, resulting in an inevitable fall. Lying on the ground, the protagonist is surprised when the girl, in a supernatural way, reveals sharp fangs, launching into a frantic attack. An indescribably horrible sensation takes over him as he feels his blood being sucked by the mysterious girl's mouth. In a desperate effort to scream for help, the intense pain silences his voice, preventing him from articulating any word. The girl, however, seems to recognize our young hero named Makoto, and upon this recognition she decides to spare him, asking if he prefers death or transformation into a being like her. Overcome by despair, he shouts that he doesn't want to die, and the girl, with a sinister smile, wipes her face with the sleeve of her clothes. In an enigmatic gesture, she walks away, leaving the poor guy lying in the middle of the street, immersed in a mixture of fear and bewilderment. Upon regaining consciousness, the main character finds himself in the hospital, surrounded by his family. The intense light in the room causes discomfort in his eyes and skin, leading him to scream about the excessive brightness. Concerned, his mother asks the nurse to turn off the lights, providing him relief. Then a very great thirst arises in an unusual way. His maternal instinct awakens, and his mother, very worried, promptly offers to bring water. Later, the doctor informs that Makoto's injuries are not serious, allowing him to return home. However, a new appointment is scheduled within a week. Before leaving, the doctor asks about the mysterious thirst. Our hero explains that it's not exactly thirst, but a similar sensation. In response, the doctor suggests the possibility of a psychological trauma, but deep down he seems to understand what is happening with his body, and he ends up touching the bandage on his neck. Back home, his mother prepares a lavish dinner. However, the main character cannot enjoy the food and apologizes. When trying to caress his head, he feels a very great discomfort and ends up recoiling. His brother, expressing determination, declares that he will not leave unpunished the one who attacked his little brother, committing to support the police in the search for the criminal. As he lies on the bed, he reflects on what happened recently. Fear envelops him as he remembers the girl sucking his blood. He remembers their eyes meeting, and that causes shivers throughout his body. The reason why she stopped the attack remains unknown. Would it be his resemblance to someone known by her? Or perhaps his blood was not compatible with the dietary needs of vampires? Could there be a particular interest of the girl for our hero? These doubts trouble his mind, preventing him from falling asleep. Some days later, he decides to return to school. His mother, worried, offers the option of returning home if he doesn't feel well. However, he assures that he'll be fine and asks her not to worry. Walking on a sunny morning towards school, Makoto feels discomfort, as if the sun burned his skin. The journey to school becomes exhausting, as if his body was on fire. Arriving there, visibly tired, his friend expresses concern, questioning him if he has improved. Rumors about the attack spread, and everyone knows what happened. His friend stated that the world is not fair, and that they only wanted to lead a calm and peaceful life, adding that all the bullies should die. At that moment, the class bully appears, mocking Makoto. He questions if he didn't die after the supposed attack during the night. When asking about the aggressor, the protagonist responds with considerable embarrassment that it was a girl. This revelation provokes laughter from the bully, awakening the curiosity of everyone about his return. Then an attractive girl, who usually bullies Makoto, appears, leaving our poor hero embarrassed by the revelation that he was attacked by a girl. He notices a pleasant aroma, triggering a confused sensation in his mind. His friend tries to start a conversation, but Makoto, distracted by the pleasant smell that surrounds him, barely pays attention. The fragrance persists in his mind, making it difficult to ignore. Upon returning to the classroom, our hero ends up sitting near the window, where the strong sun burns over his body. Faced with the growing discomfort, he decides to go to the bathroom, briefly considering the idea of leaving the school. However, the fear of his mother's worry prevents him from following this path, leading him to decide to stay at school. Upon leaving the bathroom, he notices again that smell, apparently coming from the two girls. Although he doesn't fully understand the origin of the smell, the girls feel threatened by the sinister look that he directs at them. Afraid of leaving the place and worrying his mother, he decides to return to the classroom. The bullies start demanding that he fetch snacks for them. When getting up to go to the cafeteria, Makoto ends up collapsing on the floor due to feeling unwell. By coincidence, he falls close to that girl, and the aroma of blood reaches his nostrils, awakening his most primitive instinct. You must already be imagining what kind of blood it is, right? I don't even need to explain. The girl is embarrassed to notice the fixed look on her legs, and the bully questions what the poor guy is doing. Yuki pulls him by the collar and starts threatening him. Our protagonist orders the bully to shut up, as he is out of control. Yuki goes into a rage for being disrespected, and without waiting, Makoto lands a punch in his face. The boy's nose is now broken, and blood starts to run and drip on the floor. Everyone is surprised, and the protagonist realizes that he has blood running very close to him. The insatiable desires start bubbling in his mind, and he wants to lick that blood in any way. It's a very strong desire, and he's almost giving in. However, to prevent that from happening, he closes his mouth with the greatest force possible, and decides to run out of that place. He runs into the bathroom and opens the tap with the intention of quenching his thirst with water. He repeats to himself that he is not that type of person, and starts filling his mind with good memories so that this wild desire disappears from his head. The next day, he returns to school. As it is raining and a little cloudy, he feels a little better. Upon arriving at the classroom, everyone is staring at him. Our hero had earned the respect of the other students, and even the group of friends who bullied him stay quiet without saying anything. A classmate approaches to greet him, expressing surprise at the incident with Yuki. He starts to praise, highlighting the protagonist's strength. That girl observes him, a little embarrassed, as if she now felt admiration for him. Yuki ends up arriving in the room with his nose hurt. The protagonist remembers what he did, and everyone starts laughing, making fun of him. Our hero is afraid of getting beaten, however the bully passes straight without saying anything. The girl tries to talk with Yuki, but he tells her to shut up, because he is no longer respected, and is being teased by the other classmates. During the break, Makoto fears being asked to buy lunch again, but they decide to go to the cafeteria alone, easing the tension. That makes our hero feel certain relief. Before leaving, the girl exchanges glances with him, as if she really started to admire him. His friend goes to his desk and starts celebrating the end of the bully's trouble. However, our hero affirms not being a violent person, and perceives something wrong with himself. Makoto knows very well what is happening, but he doesn't want to admit it to himself. He was transforming into a vampire, but denied this transformation at all costs. His mind starts to get blurry, and the images in his mind get distorted. He feels bad and decides to go to the infirmary. His friend, worried, offers help to accompany him, but with a sinister look, he asks the boy not to come along. Our protagonist walks with difficulty, and when feeling the smell of blood coming from some girl, starts running to avoid that the wild desires take over his mind. He goes down to the corridor and ends up falling on the stairs. It seems that needles get embedded in his skin, melting him with the heat that comes through the window. A girl finds him fallen on the floor and asks if he is okay. She wishes to take him to the infirmary, but he denies help at all costs, afraid of attacking some innocent person, just like he did with Yuki. However, the girl doesn't listen and squats down to carry him there. When seeing the girl very close to his face, he feels a strong impulse to attack her neck. Our hero even tries to hold himself back, but isn't strong enough and ends up knocking the girl on the floor. His mouth starts to salivate, wishing to bite her neck and suck her blood. If he did that, he would satiate his hunger, and the hallucinations of madness would disappear from his mind. When he's about to give in to the thirst of blood, the girl hugs his body, bringing him very close to her. He feels the beats of her heart and starts crying. When realizing how close he is of a girl, Makoto gets up quickly and starts apologizing, saying that he did something terrible. The poor girl starts laughing, and the protagonist doesn't understand anything. Then she asks if he was so in love with her that ended up not being able to control his desires. He doesn't know if the girl thought that he really was in love with her, or if the girl was disguising. Then she soon asks his name and what class he is. He responds, saying his name and that he is from class 3 of the first year, and asks the same thing to her. The girl's name was Yukiko, and she was from class 1 of the first year. On the following morning, he wakes up at 7 o'clock with the alarm clock and goes to school. He imagines that it will be a common day like all the others. However, that girl from the previous day appears and says good morning. He gets scared because he didn't imagine that she would talk with him again. In a mocking way, she asks if he managed to relieve himself. The protagonist gives a shout, saying that she understood everything wrong, and she reveals that she was joking. She asks him for a gift for having helped him yesterday on the staircase. He doesn't know very well what to give as a gift, and she asks for a drink, saying to meet in the same place of yesterday at lunchtime. He's feeling his body different, but the sun is not burning his skin like in the other days. His friend appears worried for what happened yesterday, and when calling our hero to have lunch together with him, Makoto responds that he already has a commitment. When leaving the classroom, that girl continues observing him. Makoto hands then the drink to Yukiko. They sit beside the staircase and have lunch together. The protagonist gets quite nervous for being beside a pretty little girl and doesn't know very well what to say. Then thanks for what she did on the previous day. If it wasn't for her, he doesn't know what could have happened with him. The girl says that he looks a lot like a little brother that she has, and that both are shy and indecisive. She even mentions that that place is special because no one comes there, and likes to keep looking at the sky, because that leaves her calm, recommending that he do the same. Before saying goodbye, she asks for his cell phone number. At night, he remembers that the girl said that looking at the sky is a relaxing experience. He opens the window to look at the moon and the stars, entering in a state of fruition. He gets quite happy and decides to go to the rental store, what ends up leaving his mother worried. He pedals with a lot of joy, observing the stars and the moon shining in the sky. When he's getting close to an establishment, he observes Yuki talking with some boys. It seems that he is suffering bullying of some older young men. That girl that always accompanies him keeps staring at the prota. He goes to a little market on the other side of the street because he doesn't want to meddle in these matters. However, the girl appears behind him saying his name. She would like to talk with him about an important matter. The shameless Makoto only keeps staring at the girl's legs, leaving his cheeks flushed. Without choices, he ends up following the young woman. After our hero hit that bully, he got quite different, and the girl blamed for that. After getting beaten, Yuki stopped talking and started suffering bullying of the older boys. He got beaten of the others without retaliating, and she asked for help of Makoto. That leaves the protagonist shocked. He says that he can't do anything about it because he is a weak boy and wouldn't be able to solve anything. She realizes that she had overestimated him and that in the background he was a coward of any kind. However, his conscience weighs and he decides to help, putting the girl in the back of his bike and going back until the establishment to prevent the boys from hitting in her crush. When arriving there, they are no longer in the place. Then they decide to look in the surroundings. After some minutes, they find the bullies hitting the boy in a park. After years doing bullying with our prota, Yuki was feeling in the skin how it is to be humiliated. Due to the kicks and punches, he starts to bleed, and the protagonist feels the smell of blood exhaling in the air. The boy is humiliated of the worst possible way in front of the beloved, but as he is insecure, he can't do anything. She begs for Makoto to do something about it, and he remembers that vampire asking if he wants to become someone equal to her. Our hero feels afraid of acting in an aggressive way, because he imagines that that will make him transform in a vampire, and he doesn't want to hurt the people. For being confused if he should help or not, he only observes the boy being beaten, and that is a quite shocking scene for him. The boys realize that there is a kid standing there and start hitting at him too. All these emotions make his mind bubble, and he starts to see everything blurry. Without him expecting, his senses become sharper, and he gives an extremely high jump, going on top of the bullies. He knocks down one of the lazy ones, and everyone is perplexed for him having given a jump of 5 meters of height. Our hero is not managing to control his vampiric impulses, and feels the desire of devouring that boy. However, they get scared and leave running from there, leaving the protagonist fallen on the floor. Yuki seems to have seen a ghost and stays paralyzed, while the girl runs to help them. She hands the glasses to the protagonist, and Yuki leaves the park walking. They don't understand very well what has just happened. And after some seconds, Yuki comes back with a little can of soda and leaves on the floor for the protagonist to pick up. That was a way of thanking him and then leaves. On the following day, he wakes up with notable discouragement. He was not feeding himself adequately, worrying his mother. And when going to school, his incessant thought falls on the remarkable jump of the previous night, almost resembling a flight, leading Makoto to test the jump repeatedly in the middle of the street. When entering in the classroom, his eyes meet with the ones of Yuki and Naomi. A brief sensation of embarrassment is installed, but the other two disguise. In the break, he approaches Yukiko to share a snack. They greet each other, starting a conversation. The protagonist seems to act in a peculiar way, something perceived by Yukiko. She, in a cute way, demonstrates a notable interest for him. However, due to his insecurity, none of her signals are. Then, in a direct way, she invites him for a date. He agrees that he must wait for her at the door of the school after the classes. When the bell rings, he goes to the agreed place, questioning them if it is really a date, or if they're only going out as friends. Just like any person, he also gets nervous with the idea of being with a girl. At that moment, Yuki and Naomi appear. The protagonist starts fearing that he'll be confronted, but Yuki asks if he is free today and invites him to do some things. Stuttering, the protagonist mentions a commitment, turning to Yukiko. In a friendly way, Naomi presents her to them and Yuki suggests that everyone go out together, as a couple's date. They confirm with the friend that agrees. They decide to go straight to a bowling alley, surprising the protagonist with the friendly interaction between Yuki and Naomi. He gets anxious, fearing to displease his new passion. Arriving at the bowling alley, it is her turn to play, but she has never played before. Naomi teaches her, and when launching the ball, ends up missing drastically, sitting on the floor. Everyone laughs because the scene was quite fun. She turns around quite angry. The protagonist starts to apologize. Yuki is beside him and mentions having seen Makoto fly on the previous night, asking how he did. Makoto responds that he doesn't know, and Yuki thanks for him for having saved him. The protagonist apologizes for having beaten him, and in an unexpected way, Yuki hugs our hero, laughing in a kind way. The scene cuts, showing the protagonist's friend in a library. Suddenly, some older young men appear, questioning if he knows Makoto Okazaki. Some days pass, and when arriving at the school, Yuki puts his cold hand on his neck. He gets a big scare because it was the place where he was bitten. Now, a person that was part of the group that did bullying in the past is quite friendly, and Naomi also demonstrates friendship. She invites herself to go to her boyfriend's house, and he invites Makoto to go along. The protagonist doesn't want to stay as a third wheel, but Yuki says that there is no problem, convincing the girlfriend. Our hero realizes that his friend is sad, now that he got a girlfriend and is getting away, leaving him alone. During the exchange of teachers, he passes through the corridor in front of Yukiko's room. He observes her alone beside the window and decides to go there to talk with her. Makoto says hello, and she asks what he is doing there. He responds that he passed to say hi, and invites her to go to Yuki's house after the class. She's acting in a way kind of dry, saying that she can't go today. He fears having harmed the friendship, taking her into the bowling alley, and apologizes. Yukiko affirms that there's no problem and that it was fun, leaving our protagonist with flushed cheeks. The classmates in the room comment that it is the first time that they hear Yukiko's voice. The protagonist feels awkward with the situation, says goodbye, and when leaving the room, she thanks for him having passed to talk with her. Later, he accompanies the couple until Yuki's house, surprising himself with the size of the residence. Yuki's mother asks who is the boy of glasses and asks for him to leave before the dinner. Yuki curses the mother, going up the stairs until his room. When arriving there, the protagonist gets awkward, without knowing what to say. They offer him drink. He refuses timidly, and Yuki hands him a soda. With time, he releases, starting more conversations. He asks if the boys from the other day bothered him again, and Yuki reveals that they didn't bother him anymore, not even sent a message. The protagonist thinks that maybe it is because the boys have gotten scared of Makoto. We start suspecting of the intentions of the protagonist's friend, suspecting that he is close only to feel safe. As thank you, he gives a watch to the protagonist. When realizing that he is staying as a third wheel, decides to go home. In the middle of the way, he receives a call of Nunita. The friend says that he needs to talk personally and the subject is urgent. That makes the protagonist arrive quickly at the agreed place, imagining that it would be something serious. When arriving there, his friend apologizes, revealing that gangsters set up a trap. The friend flees, leaving Makoto behind. At Yuki's house, he is having fun when receives a telephone call of Makoto. When answering, he hears the gangster's voice. Yuki starts trembling with fear. The bully says that he is beating his friend and he must appear in the usual place. Meanwhile, there would be kicks in the protagonist that screams on the phone that no one abandons the group and he must appear quickly. Otherwise, they will erase the boy. Our hero starts crying, his blurry vision. In a state of fury, gives a headbutt in the guy. The mobster gets even more nervous and frantic. When feeling the smell of his own blood, Makoto transforms in a vampire. His vision blurs and his fangs activate. The others think that he is having a seizure. Instinctively, he bites the boot of the guy. That launches him far away. The hero asks for them to leave, because he is losing the control. The transformation calls the attention of another vampire in the surroundings. Tied on the floor, he writhes. They think that the boy is passing bad and they need to finish soon this situation. In the back of that abandoned building, they see the silhouette of a person. They start screaming for the young man to appear, and the person reveals himself as a boy very young. He asks Makoto if it was him who called him. When noticing 3 meals in an isolated place, asks our hero if he is not going to devour them. Without obtaining response, decides to attack the mobsters, finishing each of them. Makoto observes the scene in front of his eyes, incapable of doing something. After feeding himself, the boy says that he needs to finalize the service, but the protagonist asks for him to stop. In response, the vampire affirms that after sucking the blood, they need to finish with the people, this being the rule. Realizing that our hero is a recently transformed, the vampire decides to finish with him, ready to erase him. The protagonist believes that it is the end and apologizes with his parents, Unexpectedly, Yuki appears, hitting the vampire with a block of cement, screams asking if Makoto is okay, and the protagonist asks for him to flee. Yuki doesn't leave alone, carrying the protagonist to outside of the abandoned building. Unfortunately, the vampire reaches them, biting Yuki's neck. 5 days pass and everyone comments on the news. 3 delinquents disappeared, and Yuki also vanished. Meanwhile, Makoto is hospitalized. Various rumors and narratives arise at school, fueling the creation of stories about them. Yukiko, upon hearing all this, experiences a deep melancholy. Naomi approaches, requesting a brief dialogue. She asks Yukiko if she has any information about Makoto. Yukiko reveals that she discovered that Makoto is hospitalized, but doesn't know the hospital because he wasn't answering messages, and his house was always empty. Naomi shares the events of the day when they were at Yuki's house. Makoto left early, and minutes later she received a call from delinquents informing that they had captured him. Upon hearing this, Yuki ran to help, and Naomi immediately called the police. 5 days have passed without news from Makoto. She blames herself, claiming that he got involved with mobsters because of her, and if she hadn't asked Yuki for help, none of this would have occurred. Crying, she hugs Yukiko to comfort her. At that moment, Naomi receives a message from our hero's cell phone, indicating the hospital where Makoto is. They go there to understand the situation. In the hospital room, they come across our hero and his mother in a dark environment without any light entry. Yukiko is surprised to see the boy in that condition. He asks his mother to leave them alone, and Naomi, about to cry, asks what happened. Our hero informs that Yuki is alive, and that he will certainly find him. He warns her not to look for him and to avoid dark and isolated places. At that moment, Yukiko sits next to the bed and asks him to tell the true situation. With an empty and devoid of the life look, he stares at the girl, revealing that he won't be able to attend school anymore, and that his life has completely changed, because now he can no longer expose himself to the sun. It was a goodbye. Yukiko assures that she'll return in the next days, not missing in any of them. Her determination is unwavering. Both leave, leaving him lying in that dark room, reflecting on the events of the day. He reveals that on that day he experienced something unique. The vampire revealed that now they were equal. Makoto goes into a rage in the hospital room, seeking to calm down by looking at the sky, as suggested by Yukiko. However, he observes the boy hanging from the outside. He extends his hand, promising to release an agreement from his prison. The protagonist tries to flee, but the boy grabs him by the clothes, throwing him through the window. Makoto falls on a pole, and the vampire affirms that he is doing well. Our hero questions about his friend, and the boy reveals that he finalized all, leaving them in a water tank of a building. He didn't conclude the protagonist for lack of time, but now intends to do so. The protagonist denies, and the boy grabs his foot, jumping from building to building until an iron structure above a train track. He plans to release the protagonist from up there, affirming that in his transformation stage, he will resist this accident, because the vampires totally transformed are extremely resistant. Sakuya reveals that he has been alive for a long time. When releasing Makoto, he reflects on Yukiko's promise of visiting him daily. At that moment, the vampire that attacked him at the beginning of the story emerges to save him, kicking the other boy down. When regaining consciousness, he realizes that he is unharmed, with the girl verifying his condition. Fixing the look on her, he hears whispers of his name. The other vampire, visibly hurt, questions the reason for which the daughter-in-law saved the boy, revealing thus the vampire's name. The daughter-in-law leaves abruptly, leaving the protagonist fallen. Later he finds him next to a water tank at the top of a building, where he realizes that Yuki is imprisoned inside of it. After the exit of the daughter-in-law, our hero gets up and flees, noticing significant changes in his body, feeling himself stronger. Recalling of the friend trapped, he decides to look for him. In front of various big water tanks, Makoto activates his vampiric senses to locate the friend, identifying exactly in which tank to look. When opening the hatch, finds Yuki trapped, getting shocked at the scene. When rescuing him, his friend expresses joy for the survival of this protagonist. At the hospital, the news of the hero's escape spreads, leading his mother to blame herself and feel responsible. However, at this moment, the son returns with the friend on his back. At the edge of dawn, they run to avoid the exposure to the sun. On the following morning, the police investigates the place, discovering the boys in the water tank. During the interrogation of Makoto's parents, they explain the situation and detail the victims. The protagonist returns to the hospital, and Naomi and Yukiko appear as soon as they receive the news that Yuki is alive. When questioning Makoto about Yuki's whereabouts, he reveals that he is in the room next door. Naomi, unable to contain the crying, runs there. Our hero gets happy when seeing the friend, but the atmosphere is broken when Naomi asks for help, leading everyone to run to the room. When arriving, they witness Yuki writhing from thirst, going through the same process that our hero experienced days before, but in a more intense way, demanding to be tied to the gurney. Our hero is discharged from the hospital, apologizing to Yuki for not being able to stay taking care of him. Yuki snaps again, clamoring for water, and our hero tries to calm him down. Yuki's mother, in a gruff way, sends our hero away from the room. On the following day in the classroom, the friend that had handed our hero over observes Naomi crying. She cries loud, and the teacher asks to take her to the infirmary. The boy defends himself, affirming not having done anything and that the fault is not his. Later, our hero is in his room reflecting on how his life will be difficult from there to ahead. He wishes to resolve everything and make his life return to normal. Whenever he thinks of the daughter-in-law, starts to sweat cold and tremble. At this moment, his father informed that there's a visit for him. When entering the room emerges Yukiko. This girl demonstrates a genuine interest in him. The boy has been a challenge until now, and she remains to his side. A series of questions is started, because she is really worried. However, our hero prefers not to involve her in this matter. Even after a lot of insistence, he ends up exploding, affirming that she has nothing to do with that, since she barely knows him. This reaction makes the girl cry, mentioning that he reminds a lot of her little brother, that passed away 5 years ago due to a disease. She couldn't do anything for him at the time, but now wishes to help Makoto to overcome his problems. When hearing that, he takes the decision of revealing everything. He tells that he was bitten by a girl and now feels sick, developing an insatiable thirst for blood. Yuki was also attacked in the same way. Yukiko questions if this is a joke, but he responds that the police had the same reaction. The culprit, called Nora, is the key to resolve all that. He cries when saying that he'll go after her to resolve the problem. At this moment, Yukiko hugs him, expressing her gratitude for having shared everything. She promises to give her best to help bring the normality back to his life. Later, he remains lying in his bed, unable to sleep. He hears a voice calling his name, and, amid a snowstorm during the dark night, decides to leave to look for the person that called him. He feels that he is being summoned by Nora, and in the middle of the way finds her. She instructs that he follow her, leading him until an abandoned building. When arriving there, Lou invites him to enter through a dark door. When entering, comes across some little plushies piled up on the floor, revealing that that place is his house. She apologizes for having transformed him and confesses that he was the only one that she couldn't finalize, leaving a mystery in the air about the motive. The protagonist requests that she restore him and his friend to normal, but she reveals that she cannot do that. Putting her hand on his face, she invites him to live together. With the situation intensifying, she explains that she can no longer remain in the city, and that if he continues living with humans, he will suffer. Thus, she invites him to share food and live together. Makoto goes into despair, mentioning his family and friends, expressing the desire for her to give back his life. As he had fed himself abundantly days ago, he starts feeling unwell, because his organisms got used to that quantity of food. Nora reveals that she stored food in his stomach since that day, and offers food to him, explaining that this is common among vampires. Then she opens her mouth to feed the protagonist. He wished to refuse, but his thirst was intense, and eventually he accepted. That sensation was wonderful, and when they finished, she inquired if he had liked it. However, Makoto started crying and fleeing from the place. The girl remained sitting in her mountain of little plushies while the protagonist left for home. When lying in his bed, he tried to process everything that was happening. On the following morning, he went down to the kitchen, and his mother asked if he was going to have breakfast. Even saying yes, his face was pale, and his mother inquired if he was okay. When putting the plate with the breakfast, he tried to eat, but his stomach turned, making him feel unwell. His organism didn't tolerate common foods anymore, and our hero started crying, asking if he could live forever with his parents. His emotional mother said yes, asking for him not to worry with that. At the hospital, Yuki's mother visited his room, finding him in a state of frenzy, thirsty. The story then presents a flashback, showing that Yuki's mother was absent, giving more importance to fun than to his son. It is revealed that she had an unhappy ending. On the following morning, Yukiko wakes up calmly, observing the sky through the window to feel relaxed. Her mother wishes her good morning before leaving to work, and she goes to the kitchen to take a glass of water. When returning, greets the picture of her little brother that resembles a lot Makoto. At school, she runs to Naomi to greet her, asking if everything is okay. Naomi responds positively, inviting her to have lunch together. They sit in that corridor next to the staircase, and Naomi tells about how Yuki is. He thrashed around and seemed not to remember her. Yukiko affirms that Makoto is feeling better and seems calmer. Her friend asks if she likes him, but here she gets embarrassed and doesn't say anything. To change the subject, she asks how Naomi met Yuki. They met in the gym. She liked him since that time, then wrote a little letter of declaration, and Yuki called her accepting to date. Despite him having this sly way, he is quite lonely and shy, thanks to the absence of his parents. He said with a smile on his face that it was better for him never to have existed. His mother says that she will never abandon him and calls the friend to visit him in the hospital. The scene cuts to the protagonist lying in his room. He doesn't stop thinking a minute about the daughter-in-law and is considering how it would be to live beside her. At that moment, his cell phone rings, and it is Yukiko. She's desperate, chases saying that Yuki vanished, and something unexpected happened with his mother. The hospital is full of policemen looking for the vanished boy. At that moment, the doorbell of his house rings, and he hears a scream in the downstairs. The policeman enters his house without his parents permitting, saying that he would like to talk with our hero. They try to take the boy by force, and the mother gets in the front to prevent them. One of the policemen ends up grabbing her, while another puts a gag on the mouth of our hero. Those men were not policemen, but made part of a secret organization. They comment that they need to take care so as not to get bitten by the boy and start taking him outside. When approaching a van to take our hero away are attacked. Yuki appears from the sky to rescue Makoto. They fight with those men, win the battle, and manage to flee. They stop in a safe place, where Makoto says that he heard requests for help and this time was saved correctly. The protagonist asks if he had fed himself, and he tells that when he realized was on top of his mother. In a sadistic way, expresses happiness for that, laughing like a madman and saying serves her right for her. Now Yuki can fly like our hero and points to the sky, praising its beauty. He invites the protagonist to flee together because now they can no longer live with the humans. The protagonist refuses, saying that he can't do that. Yuki asks if they are not friends anymore and why Makoto looks at him with a scared face, trying to convince him to flee. The scene cuts showing Yukiko and Naomi arriving at the protagonist's house. His parents discovered that those men were not policemen, and the true policemen arrived to understand what was happening. One of the officers asks, "Who are those girls?" and they reveal to be friends of Makoto. Here his mother asks what is happening and reveals that her son was taken by strange people. Just imagine the suffering of this mother, folks. She doesn't have even one day of peace. Naomi also starts crying, asking where the boys are, and Yukiko starts believing even more in this story. The protagonist takes his friend until Nora. He says that this girl will help them. When arriving there, the place seems empty, and when calling for the girl, she appears above them with a sinister look. She jumps until down there, and they get quite scared. The girl approaches slowly and keeps staring at Yuki. The protagonist presents his friend, saying his name, and Nora reveals that she already knows him, because she was looking at the two for a lot of time. She sniffs Yuki and doesn't seem to trust him a lot, landing a kick in his chin. They start to battle, and the protagonist doesn't know why she is acting in this way, starting to scream for her to stop with that. She felt a smell of darkness coming from him, and if Makoto continued together of this boy, would destroy himself. What she really wishes is to be able to flee only she and Makoto. Yuki shows himself really mad, saying things without sense. He decides to retaliate the attack, jumping in a quite aggressive way, being quick enough to reach and bite the leg. In the intention of separating the fight, something puts the arm in the front and he bites. Starts crying, asking for him not to do that, and return to be the Yuki from before. The boy releases the arm, saying that he doesn't understand anything, but ends up fleeing through the door. Nora uses a peculiar ability to remedy Makoto's wound. Yuki roams the city, jumping from building to building, seeming genuinely immersed in the spirit of Jiraiya. After some time, a colleague asks Nora to see such practice, and she doesn't appreciate much the way she was approached. Worried with his friend, Yuki expresses the need to find him, but Nora prevents him from proceeding. A lot of time has already passed since Nora was human, and she has no more memories of this time. Erased various human memories and witnessed the metamorphosis of the city, losing all the reminiscence of her humanity. However, when seeing Makoto's face on that night, her memories resurface. At this moment, she understands that she knew someone very similar to Makoto, and when seeing his face, the memories hidden in her mind are activated. In a way kind of romantic, she kisses him, and the scene cuts to Yukiko looking frantically for Makoto. His mother, worried, decides to take her home, seeing that it is dangerous to walk in the street at this hour. Yukiko leaves Naomi at the door of the house and, when approaching to enter, comes across Yuki hidden behind bushes, visibly hurt, causing great shock. Upon entering the house, we notice that her family doesn't show great concern for her. Naomi runs straight to her room, locks the door, opens the window to allow Yuki to enter, who lies down. She becomes apprehensive upon noticing his wounds and starts crying. The scene changes, revealing that Makoto has fallen asleep next to Nora, both sleeping on a mountain of toys. Meanwhile, Yukiko is restless about their deal and cannot sleep, worried about her thoughts about him. The next morning, early, Yukiko watches television. Her mother says goodbye before leaving for work, warning her not to stay out late due to the danger. At school, Yukiko notices Naomi's absence and decides to call her friend. After a few minutes of trying, she finally manages to talk to her. Naomi makes up an excuse about a cold, actually hiding Yuki in her room. Yukiko questions if it isn't strange that people are dying and nobody talks about it anymore, as if the media and the police wanted to cover up the subject. Naomi, busy, says that she is going to hang up because she is feeling unwell. Makoto finally wakes up next to Nora. She murmurs in pain and he realizes that it is due to her injured leg from the previous battle. To reassure him, Nora struggles to get up, confidently stating that she doesn't need to be worried about. Nora extends her hand, inviting him to leave together. He considers going with the attractive girl but imposes a condition, not to hurt anyone, only to get food without harming people. Formerly he was human, and he wishes that she would be too again. Nora smiles and promises to strive for that. The scene cuts, showing that Yukiko looking for Makoto. She notices a noise, and when looking to the side, she has the impression of seeing two people flying. Looking closely, Yukiko realizes that they are just two birds and continues walking towards the location of the battle with the mobsters. Arriving there, she crosses the police tape and enters the abandoned building. Observing the marks on the floor, she's surprised when someone appears behind her. Startled, she turns around quickly, and the man asks what she is doing there. Mentioning vampires, he asks if she knows anything about the subject. When she remains quiet, he deduces that Aichi has information about vampires and introduces himself as Masami Asu, inviting her to talk. Masami takes Yukiko to a restaurant for the conversation, thanking her as if she had another choice. He reveals that he is 25 years old and has dedicated his whole life to research about vampires, although he doesn't know for sure what they are. The only certainty is that these beings exist, with people being found with bite marks on their necks monthly, without anyone being arrested. He asks if she knows anything since she was at the location. Yukiko questions if there is any way to save someone who has become a vampire, and Masami says that if there was, he could have saved his sister. One night, when he was 9 years old, he woke up and saw the image of a vampire over the bed. The mysterious girl stared him in the eyes and left, leaving his sister unconscious. After this incident, his little sister changed, locking herself in her room, afraid of the light and screaming that she felt thirsty. In a moment of carelessness, she escaped through the window and suffered an accident. He starts crying, expressing the wish to have traded places with her. People doubted when he talked about the girl in the room, accusing him of having had a dream. The strange guy managed to convince her that he is reliable, and she ends up revealing that her friend had a similar fate, being taken by a group of strange people. This weird guy already gets excited, saying that he will help her find her friend. Poor Yukiko is crying with hope. Masami says that he does everything to discover the truth about vampires. Furthermore, he doesn't want the boy to have the same fate as his sister, and ends up extending his hand, offering help. The scene cuts, and we see Naomi's mother worried about her being locked in her room. The girl refuses to open the door, and her father appears demanding that she opens it. The guy starts, then, to kick the door to see what is happening, because they're hearing a strange noise inside there. Upon opening the door, the father sees his daughter together with Yuki, and at that moment he starts fighting with the young man. This ends up making Yuki transform into a vampire and, out of control, bite his girlfriend's father's neck. Naomi keeps seeing that whole scene. Her father was being bitten by a vampire before her eyes. Yuki turns his attention to Naomi's mother and also attacks her, while the girl remains without any reaction. Finally, upon finishing her, he jumps to his girlfriend. She realizes that he is suffering and is out of control, therefore she hugs him to calm him down. The scene cuts and we see the protagonist's mother sad about her son's disappearance. The poor woman doesn't have a minute of peace, and she ends up seeing her son in the window and leaves desperately to help him. He had come to say goodbye and said that he can't live with them anymore. His mother says that he doesn't need to worry because she and his father wanted to do everything to protect him, and she couldn't live without her little son. However, Makoto had already decided. He wished to share everything with her, but that could put his mother in danger. Thus he withdraws without explaining exactly what was happening. The boy's mother starts screaming desperately, but she can't do anything about that. The scene returns to Naomi's house, and we see Yuki sitting on the floor. He had finished the girl's parents and, unfortunately, also finished poor Naomi. She didn't have a happy ending, and upon regaining consciousness, he starts crying about what he just did. Soon after, Makoto finds Nora. He affirms that he is ready, and they decide to leave. On the way, he holds her hand. She demonstrates contentment upon managing to escape that place with the boy. Upon leaving the building, however, they are surprised by the soldiers of the enigmatic organization. The soldiers start a series of shots, and the vampire positions herself in front to protect the boy. While being hit, she exhorts Makoto to flee. Our hero, upon giving a jump, comes across the daughter-in-law fallen on the floor, unable to escape, unleashing his fury when releasing his fangs. He leans on the gate and invests against the soldiers, unleashing a frenetic battle. However, the considerable quantity of opponents results in a sure hit, culminating in Makoto's defeat. Both young men lie unconscious on the floor. On the following day, the students of the school behave as if nothing of strange was occurring in the city. Yukiko, however, saddens upon recalling Makoto and declares that she won't give up on him, promising to find him. The peculiar individual sends messages thanking her for having accepted his invitation to talk, assuring that he is available for any need. Upon checking the message history, Yukiko perceives the absence of responses. At that moment, she receives a call on her friend's phone, answering to find Yuki crying copiously, confessing that he couldn't avoid something serious. Yukiko, confused, screams looking for Yuki. She decides to call the peculiar individual asking for help, and he appears to accompany her until Naomi's residence. When arriving, they note that the house is locked, and the guy suggests to go through the back. When skirting the place, they spot a window with the curtain ajar. Upon spying, they witness Yuki next to Naomi and his parents. Masami gets shocked when perceiving that they are in front of a vampire. Yukiko, upon seeing the scene, asks for Yuki to open the window. When doing that, he asks who is the stranger, and presents him as someone that came to help and in whom they could trust. Observing to inside, Yukiko notes that her friend is no longer alive. Yuki starts crying, admitting that he couldn't avoid. Feeling the need to detain him to avoid more atrocities, Yuki leans in the window asking for them to end with everything. However, the strange subject touches his shoulder, affirming that they can't do that. Yukiko immediately perceives the strangeness of the man, who demonstrates an obsession for vampires and insists in taking Yuki to his apartment. He convinces the young man of the importance of surviving, arguing that they need to flee to avoid being captured by the organization that plans to perform experiments in his body. Yukiko says it's wrong that he can't get away with it. However, Masami argues that they're dealing with something beyond human understanding because it's about vampires. If she wants to save Yuki, she has to get ready to stop being normal. Yuki tells about Makoto's betrayal and how he ran off with his daughter-in-law, which makes him cry. Out of nowhere, the weird guy hugs Yuki, asking to be turned into a vampire. Yukiko realizes she's gotten mixed up with someone really strange, and she freezes up at the sight. They head to Masami's apartment and they put Yuki in bed to recover. As time goes on, the girl starts to feel like something's wrong. The weird guy completely changes his behavior, acting like a total psycho. Yukiko argues that it's not right to protect Yuki, that he should pay for what he did. Masami tells her to shut up and not talk to Yuki anymore, saying that everyone abandoned and betrayed him and he's the only one Yuki can trust. At that moment, Yukiko throws the coffee cup on the floor and runs away from there like crazy. The guy tries to stop her, worried she'll tell the police and ruin his plans. He scratches Yuki with a knife to get him to turn into a vampire, telling the boy to feed, even though Yuki refuses, while he keeps saying that vampires are the answer for the world and he needs to get stronger. Besides, he already finished off other people, this being the fourth, making sure Yuki has food. Swayed by these words, the boy jumps at Yukiko, forcing her to drink from the floor. She passes out and has a dream about her little brother, who says goodbye slowly, fading from her memory. When she wakes up, Yukiko sees the house is on fire and she survived. Weak, she tries to crawl, but the flames are slowly eating away at the house. Unable to move, she sees the fire near her feet. She tries to crawl, but the weakness and pain all over her body take over. She understands that the guy's plan was to use her, and she almost accepts her fate, starting to say goodbye to those she couldn't help. But the thought of Makoto encourages her to gather her strength and little by little get up. Yukiko throws herself out of the house, determined, deciding not to give up. She runs, wanting to find a way to save Yuki, because she couldn't save her little brother. Up to the fourth scene, we find the main character tied up in a place that looks like an experimental lab. He's confused and really scared, and right after, people who look like doctors come into the place. They ask some questions to check if the boy is awake, and when they confirm he is, they get ready to give him a shot. After getting the shot, he starts to feel sick, like his body is melting, and he can hear the screams around him when in his mind, we have a time skip of 10 years. Now we see the main character as an adult, showing his work routine with some lazy people. Because she's really nice, they take advantage of her kindness, giving her stuff to do. Like a regular person, she goes home by subway and stops at the market to shop. Walking down the dark streets back home, we see that the past is still alive in her mind, making her scared to walk in the dark. When she gets home, she takes a shower and lies down next to a picture of her little brother. She still remembers him every day and falls asleep quickly. On the weekend, she goes to a goodbye party for an employee at the company. He mentions that since it's his last day, he has a wish to make. He says that Yukiko always wears a scarf, even when it's hot, and he wants to see what she would look like without it. She says that there's nothing wrong with her neck, but being really nosy, he ends up pulling the girl's scarf off. Everyone is surprised to see a big scar, making the mood heavy. She covers it up, hiding it with her hand, asking them not to worry since it's no big deal. One of the co-workers tells off the nosy guy, saying that what he did is really bad. When they say goodbye, that guy comes up to her, apologizing for his co-worker's behavior. She answers, telling him not to worry, explaining that the scar is from an injury 10 years ago and it's nothing serious. She goes on her way, while the guy keeps apologizing for what his coworker did. The next day, we again follow Yukiko's routine. She works in the office, and her coworker, named Sudo, seems to be interested in her. He invites her to go home together and they walk down the street, passing by a park with a pretty cherry blossom tree. Sudo asks if she'd like to have a drink before they go home, suggesting they stop at the convenience store to buy some drinks and snacks. But the girl says no, saying she's not really interested. Sudo doesn't give up and insists it'll be quick, just 30 minutes. With his persistence, she gives in, agreeing that it'll be quick, 30 minutes max. They buy something to drink and sit in the square. They start talking about hobbies, and Sudo seems really nice. He likes to cook curry and offers to bring some for her to try, but she says no. Sudo laughs, praising the girl's honesty. He was a little down because his ex-girlfriend got married. They dated for 5 years, and that it's been 3 years since they broke up. In those 3 years, he feels like he hasn't done anything useful in his life, but he was happy that she moved on. In a relaxed way, he asks her what she thinks about marriage. She says that it seems impossible for her, explaining that her parents got divorced when she was a kid, which messed up her view of marriage. Even though she knows she needs to fix it in the future, she sees little chance of getting married being who she is. Pseudo says he doesn't see anything wrong with her, and, with a smile, mentions that he's a little weird too. This makes Yukiko feel a little better, thanking him. After that, they spend some more time together. When they leave, they say goodbye at the subway station. The girl says she had a lot of fun, making the guy emotional. She says goodbye, wishing him good night, and watches the guy walk away. In the subway car, she wonders about her life, and looking at her reflection in the mirror, she slowly falls asleep. In the advertising billboards, Masami's picture shows up, saying he's a criminal suspected of causing the disappearance of 3 kids. When she gets off the subway, she sees some magazines at a newsstand. On the cover, it talks about the 35-year-old vampire man accused of crimes. Seeing Masami's picture, Yukiko starts to feel sick. The magazine says he was living hidden in a religious community in the mountains. She panics, crouching on the floor, crying and getting everyone's attention. Days later, Pseudo asks a coworker if she knows what happened to Yukiko, because she hasn't come to work for a few days. He decides to go to her house, and her mother greets him. She takes him to her daughter's room, who is sitting on the floor. Pseudo asks how she is, and the girl falls to the floor, apologizing for missing so many days of work. She tried to go to work, but she couldn't leave the house. When she stepped outside, her body froze, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't do it. Pseudo tries to understand what's going on, but she doesn't tell him. The guy realizes it's a sensitive thing and doesn't push too much, telling her not to worry because you'll contact her agency. Later, we see Pseudo at his house, really worried about Yukiko. He goes to sleep, thinking about the hard times the girl is going through. The next day early, he shows up at her house, surprising the girl and her mother. He thought that if he went with her to work, she would have more courage to go. Here, she says thanks, and mentions she's going to change clothes. Coming back quickly, she apologizes for being late, and as she leaves, her body starts to shake. She feels strong tension and chest pain, making it hard to walk. Pseudo kindly supports her shoulder to keep her from falling, asking if she can walk with support. Together, they face the challenges. That way, they start working together every day, with Pseudo picking her up and taking her home. He interacts more at work, making sure to go with her every day. Once she says thanks for everything. As he goes with her to work and back home, she gets better little by little. Pseudo smiles and says he's happy, asking for something special. A date the next day. He suggests lunch followed by a walk, shocking her, but she says yes. Even though he wants to pick her up at home, he suggests they meet at the subway. She happily agrees, getting the courage to take off her scarf. When she gets to the meeting place, she watches him from far away, surprising the guy. The girl is wearing a different outfit, without the scarf, and asks the guy if she looks weird like this. He smiles and compliments her, making her blush. They spend the day together at the mall, trying out perfumes and items at a store. She puts on a hat and glasses, making him laugh. Finally, they sit down in a square to have lunch. The sparkle in the girl's eyes gets brighter. She smiles honestly, showing a change in the last few months. Time flies, and he asks if there's a special place she'd like to go. First, she takes him to the school she went to, explaining her connection to the place. Then she leads him to another place. They walk for a few minutes until she finds Naomi's old house, now a parking lot. She says it was her friend's home, starting to pray for Naomi's name. Meanwhile, the guy watches the girl. At that moment, Makoto's mother shows up and recognizes Yukiko, and as always, some situation has to show up to remind the characters of their traumas. Makoto's mother is happy to have found Yukiko in that place, and it had been a long time since they had seen each other. She thanks the girl for helping for so long in the search for her son, recognizing her contribution. She sees the guy there next to her and asks if he's her boyfriend. This ends up embarrassing her a little, and he introduces himself, saying his name is Pseudo. She asks if the girl came there to see Naomi's house, and she says yes. Makoto's mother makes a gesture of prayer. She ends up inviting the two to go to her house. The girl doesn't really want to go, but Pseudo keeps insisting, and they end up going there. When they get there, they talk a little about how they grew up. She mentions that her son got married and became a grandfather recently. The two young people congratulate her. As for Makoto, they haven't heard from him during this time, but she always leaves the door unlocked for him to come in whenever he wants. Imagine a mother's pain, folks. She suffered all this time and doesn't know what happened to her son, if he's okay or not. But she hopes he's okay. She mentions that her son's room is untouched, without changes. Hearing this, Yukiko asks to go see Makoto's room. When she gets there, the room is dark, but she sees that it's the way he left it. When she goes in, she has some memories of the boy, knowing that this won't be good for her mental state. Makoto's mother says that she always wanted to thank the girl for helping during this time. This makes her cry, apologizing for not having done enough because they couldn't find him. Actually, his mother blamed herself for not being able to give her son a happy life. Everyone was growing up, working, getting married, and even having kids, but she couldn't give that life to Makoto. All she wanted was for her son to be happy, and wondered why she wasn't able to give that to him. But she understands that he might be somewhere out there, trying his best to be happy, and it wouldn't be fair for her to keep beating herself up. So, Yukiko should also have a happy life, and try to have the most satisfying life possible, because she was also trying for that. After that, they say goodbye, and she thanks him for accepting the invitation. The two leave. It's very late at night, and they decide to go to their homes. She turns down Sudo's offer to be dropped off at her apartment door, saying that she's fine and can go home alone. He leaves her near the station. She says thanks, says it was a lot of fun the day and that she really liked the hat he gave her as a gift. He asks if they could go out more often, and she agrees. So they say goodbye, and he watches the girl walk away. He feels like something's wrong, but lets her go home alone. When the girl least expects it, she has a hallucination seeing a stain on the fence, all dirty. She turns around quickly, but the image of the boy fades away, making her heart beat faster. Her legs get wobbly. She loses her balance and falls to the ground. Sudo, who is standing far away watching, runs to help her, but the girl tells him not to worry because she was just tired from walking so much, convincing him that she can go home alone. When she leaves, we see that she's crying a lot, and the visit to Makoto's house wasn't good for her. The next day, we see that she didn't go to work. Sudo calls her, and Yukiko says that she's not feeling well and has a fever. He apologizes for making her work so hard on Saturday, and she says it wasn't that at all, she's just really tired. He hangs up the phone, telling her to take care of herself and get well. After 3 days, he decides to call her mother, since the girl wasn't answering her cell phone anymore. At that moment, we realize that she was lying to her mother. She said that she had taken a vacation and was traveling, while to her coworkers she said she was sick at home. This makes him worried, and he runs to her mother's house. When he arrives, they try to find out where she was. The girl's mother had called the hotel, where she said she had made a reservation, but the hotel couldn't find any reservation in the girl's name. He asks to go to Yukiko's room, and the mother takes him there. He looks for clues and finds a magazine mentioning that the young vampire is alive in the mountains. He grabs the magazines and starts flipping through them. This story became famous some time ago, and in recent months some new news has come out. He asks the girl's mother what happened to her in the past. She hesitates a little, but ends up giving in, because he's determined to help. She tells everything that had happened in the detail. Desperately, he runs to a car rental place and rents a car. He keeps trying to contact Yukiko, and, when searching about the vampire's location, he finds out that he's on a mountain in Miyagi Prefecture. He puts the exact location on the GPS and leaves for there. His cell phone rings, and it was Yukiko. She apologizes, saying that she was out of charger and could only call now. Without knowing that he found out the whole story with her mother, she makes some excuses. He asks if she went to look for Masami. He reveals that her mother told him everything and that she doesn't need to do something like that, going after a despicable worm. She's tried hard enough and had done the most she could, being enough. She should follow her mother's advice and lead a happy life moving forward. Yukiko says that she needs to check, because there's a chance that Makoto and Yuki are alive in that place. Sudo tries to convince her not to do it, declares himself to her on the phone, saying that he likes her a lot and wants to spend his whole life by her side, even that he loves her. On the other end of the line, she says she's happy to hear that, thanks him, and hangs up soon after. He gets desperate, tries to call again, but the phone is unavailable. On the fourth try, she turns off her cell phone with determination, showing she's in a place with a sign that prohibits the entry of strangers. Based on her religion of vampires, she goes in quietly looking for clues. Noticing security cameras, she walks, avoiding being seen in the recordings. After going through the outside area, she sneaks into one of the buildings. Peeking through the window, she sees people sleeping on the floor and a bizarre painting in the background. Noticing a distant church, she decides to investigate. Arriving there, she checks if there's any open area. She opens the window with tools, searches the inside, and notices a suspicious basement. Without hesitating, she decides to go down, but is surprised by a boy. He starts by asking her not to move, thinking they're reporters from the press. Realizing it's just a kid, she asks if there's a vampire coming down the stairs. The little boy simply answers that it's none of her business. The girl breaks free from him and runs to the door. When she gets there, she starts banging and shouting Makoto and Yuki's names, saying she came looking for them. At that moment, some other members show up and also think it's the press. And when they're about to take her away, Masami shows up, saying she's an old friend. He acts sinister, and the other members apologize for acting like that with her. They say sorry. The weird man says she'll be welcome to the blood of a happiness, as they call the place, and takes her to a room. When they leave, she breaks down, nervous, her hands shake, and she starts to cry with anger. As soon as the sun rises, the little boy comes into the room bringing breakfast. He says that the priest wants to talk to her after breakfast. She gets up to talk to Masami. On the way, she sees several children playing outside, and the guide reveals that the priest bought the abandoned school, renovating the place. She asks how long he's been there, and the little boy reveals that it's since birth, living with everyone. Happily, he says how great it is to live there. Yukiko arrives at Masami's room, and the little boy opens the door for her. They call him Priest, and in a sinister way, he pretends to be kind, asking if she slept well. After 10 years without seeing each other, he says he's happy to see her again. Yukiko asks about Makoto and Yuki, and the priest confirms that they're in the basement, but he can't take her there right away, because only the special ones can enter. That night, he plans to announce that she's also special, allowing her to enter. We pass by the rope seeing Pseudo arriving. The members of the religion consider the place private, asking him to leave quickly. He asks about a girl with shoulder-length hair, but the members refuse to answer. At night, to participate in the event, the boy shows up with a mask, telling her to put it on. She does and goes to the church, where everyone is wearing white masks, worshipping an image and praying to it. The priest announces that they'll offer their vital energy to God. We already know that the situation is strange and will get worse. Arriving there, the priest mentions that it's a special night, with his and God's old friend present. This friend met God when he was still human. He invites her to come closer, and everyone applauds. Taking off the hood, he declares that she'll offer her vital energy to God. After putting some in the cup, they decide to take it directly to this God, who we know is a vampire. When they arrive, the vampire is locked in a cell. The priest claims he brought food for him. Looking closer, Yukiko realizes it's Yuki. He takes the cup and drinks, but seems significantly different. The boy doesn't react, unable to even speak. Then Masami calls Yukiko to come closer and try to talk to Yuki. She says several things, but the boy remains paralyzed without reaction. All this was part of the priest's plan, who wanted to make Yuki speak anyway, and thought that using her doors and her Yukiko could do that. But Yuki remains paralyzed, without saying a word. Realizing that his approach didn't work, the priest decides to lock him there until Yukiko can make him speak, and if she can, he promises to let her see Makoto. After this event, this guy acts as if nothing is happening. Then, the boy asks the priest about Yukiko's state, saying he's worried. The priest says she's talking to God. Deciding to check, the boy goes down there to confirm if Yukiko managed to make Yuki speak. Arriving, he finds Yukiko pretty hurt, unable to stand. He pushes the girl to make Yuki speak, but with no luck. Yukiko laughs, mentioning that Masami messed up by being ignored for 10 years, calling him trash. Some parts need a summary due to the seriousness of the manga, stopping full details about what happens. Today, the boy is worried about Yukiko. At night, he decides to go to the church to check on her, unable to stop thinking about who Makoto is, mentioned by Yukiko. On the way, he sees a shadow that turns out to be Pseudo, sneaking around looking for his loved one. The boy, scared, initially thinks it's someone from the press or police. Pseudo explains that he just came to get Yukiko, leaving the boy scared. The guy tries to convince the boy that the leader of this place is a criminal and that if he can't save the girl, she might not survive. The boy starts to scream, saying that everyone wants to trick him, and that he won't fall for the believers' talk, calling for reinforcements. A strong man shows up and captures the wise guy. Unconscious, he remembers the first time he saw Yukiko in the job interview. Waking up with a headache, the priest asks if he knows Yukiko. Pseudo recognizes the man and asks where she is. The man starts to laugh, saying she's fine, but busy talking to God. Pseudo demands to be taken to her, and the priest agrees to do that. Masami takes Pseudo to the church. The guy waits on the stairs, as told by the priest. Going down, our hero hears his loved one's desperate screams and runs to check what's happening. At that moment, the bad guy is holding Yukiko. Seeing this, Pseudo gets furious and goes to rescue his loved one, but the attacker pulls out a tool to attack our hero. I say again that I can't detail some scenes of this story. Pay attention to catch all the details, because the work is really good. Pseudo confronts the priest, who is holding a blade. Even being hurt in the arm, Pseudo managed to knock down the villain, giving him a strong headbutt on the nose. Finally, he hits an elbow on the already damaged nose. With the priest passed out on the floor, Pseudo takes the object out of his arm and looks for Yukiko in the dark cell. Finding her pretty hurt, he realizes that the situation is worse than he thought and promises to save her. The girl gets worried, and Pseudo explains that the priest is passed out. He says he'll always be by her side because he loves her, and picks her up to run away from the place. But Yukiko wants to save Yuki, and Pseudo warns about the danger of staying in the area and the need to call the police to rescue the boy. Unfortunately, because he took too long, he is hit from behind. The villain wasn't passed out, and with the serious injury, Pseudo falls to the floor. Witnessing the scene, Yukiko freezes, and the guy tells her to run away. The priest curses her, saying that she's useless and the mission was to make Yuki speak. Furious, she attacks the priest, but is restrained, hitting the guy on the floor. Desperate, she screams for him to stop. Unfortunately, Pseudo remains lying on the floor. The villain restrains her, telling her to say goodbye to the guy. At that moment, she remembers good memories with him, thanks to Pseudo, who brought hope back. She asks him not to go on, and because of her screams, Yuki comes back to normal, realizing his old friend asking for help. Yuki gets up and orders Masami to release the girl. Hearing this, the villain gets happy, because the vampire came back to normal and starts talking to Yuki, saying he had waited all this time to turn them into vampires. Everyone was waiting for this moment and starts asking Yuki to bite them. Yukiko realizes that this man is crazier than he seems. At that moment, Yuki hits him in the stomach, throwing him hard on the fence. Yukiko sees her old friend coming back to normal and trying to save her. He fights a little more with the priest, realizing that the girl's boyfriend is in critical condition. He goes there and offers help, saying they need to save this man at any cost. Then he carries the guy on his back and leaves the church basement. Arriving outside, the boy starts to worship God. Yuki says that he's not God, but a human, and asks the boy to save that man. I didn't mention before, but the boy seems to have liked Yukiko, thinking about her all the time. Seeing the hurt girl, he decides to help them and shows the way. Going out in the sun, Yuki starts to burn, but doesn't give up, continuing to take Pseudo to a safe place. The believers realize that God is walking and go to understand what's happening. They want to worship him, but Yuki asks them to save that man. They start to help because God was ordering them to. Yukiko falls to the ground, pretty weak, and the boy watches, calling someone to help her. At night, the girl wakes up in a place with some bandages on her face. Worried about Pseudo, she realizes that he's on the stretcher next to her. If this good guy had died, I would cry a lot. She doesn't know it if he's still alive. Gets close to his face to check his breathing. Approaching, he wakes up and is happy that she's okay. They reach out their arm for her to hold his hand, and at that moment she starts to cry a lot. The poor girl hasn't had a very easy life. At that moment she hears a noise outside and goes to the window to check. The believers were worshipping Yuki, thinking he was God, but the boy doesn't feel very good with all this attention. Yukiko watches that scene from outside, seeing that those people were brainwashed and believed in basically anything. The sub-leader shows up and asks for silence. He tells God that they always waited for him and asks why he left the underground. Yuki reveals that the priest, called by them, had lured him inside, mistreated him and the girl. Who hurt Pseudo was the priest, so Yuki locked him inside, and reveals that he's still alive. The people there don't believe it and say that it was the woman who did evil. They ask when the trial will end and ask to be transformed like him, waiting for this all this time. Yuki reveals that he wants to end all this and won't transform them like him. He thanks them for the food provided during this time. In reality, he's not a god, just a consequence of what was once human. He ruined the dreams of his mother, girlfriend, and even her family. They shouldn't think he's a god, because Masami tricked everyone, and this one who says he's a priest is a demon. At that moment, the individual is trapped in the cell, and we have a flashback of this character to understand why he's the worst villain of all time. I'll cut some parts, but pay attention, because I'll leave it in the subtext. From an early age, he had psychopath attitudes. His mother called him a monster for the things he did to his sister, asking him not to come home anymore. Masami watched his sister from outside, cultivating evil desires, feeling jealous of her, who was well treated by her parents. One night, he breaks into the girl's room to end it, but the daughter-in-law shows up, being the first time he has contact with a vampire. The daughter-in-law attacks the sister, who asks for help. After feeding, the daughter-in-law leaves, and the parents blame Masami for the injury on the little girl. After turning into a vampire, she jumps from the hospital window and doesn't survive an accident due to the fragility of the transformed body. His parents abandon him and he starts living on the streets, blaming himself and wanting to have been taken by God. Obsessed with vampires, Masami eats the leftovers thrown away by his mother and stands out at school, being an excellent student. This characteristic is common in psychopath people, very intelligent, who see others as trash. He mentions that people are like empty bags, laughing without thinking. From then on, he wants to become like a god, saying that only he knows of their existence, being an enlightened being. In an attempt to become a vampire, he starts drinking the vital energy of several living beings. He believed that committing crimes could make him a god. As this didn't work, he decides to look for him in person. He starts committing crimes to get the vampire's attention. In the newspapers, they report the disappearance of children, all in a nearby neighborhood. The police suspect the same criminal. After intense investigation, the police find Masami in a dark place, interrupting a sacred ceremony. He's arrested and spends some years in jail. He receives the news of his parents' death, laughing like crazy. Years later, he is released and a bailiff says that his name is now Masami. He doesn't stop committing crimes, reported in newspapers about the disappearance of teenagers. It comes to the moment when he finds Yukiko in an abandoned building, presenting himself as a good guy. The flashback ends. Returning to the present, where the vice leader frees the priest. He explains to Masami that they are in big trouble. Realizing the situation intensifying, Yukiko goes down there. The people, crazy, ask God to save them. Yukiko asks them to stop. Yuki isn't God, but the crowd, crazy, throws her back, and the boy holds her. He asks her to go back inside, because she hadn't recovered yet. At that moment, Masami shows up, and everyone goes silent when they see them approaching. Worried about Masami, he takes a blade and makes a cut on his forehead. He yells for everyone to shut up, paralyzing the people there. He approaches Yuki slowly, asking to be transformed into a vampire. Yuki refuses and says he wants to end everything. In Masami's mind, passed by all the people he sent to drag to get to this moment. Furious, he orders them to devour the vampire to become a god like him. Hearing the command, they act like fierce animals, attacking Yuki. He tries to escape, but there are many, and fiercely they pile up. Yukiko screams desperately Yuki's name, but it's too late. Meanwhile, Masami laughs in a strange way, and Yuki little by little disappears. Yuki's call is heard at long distances, reaching a laboratory where Makoto is trapped. Realizing the call, our hero wakes up with his friend's calls. And soon after, the little boy called Sakuya shows up. He's the one who turned Yuki into a vampire and is like this because it took 10 years to regenerate his body from his head. The main character is surprised that 10 years have passed, and the little boy releases him from there. He reveals that he'll run away and find Yuki, because he heard his voice asking for help. The boy explains that only they can hear this voice, and when running away, reveals that he can't leave without the daughter-in-law, hearing her in a nearby place during all this time. Sakuya realizes that the girl's voice is low, and says that they need to act soon, because it's dangerous in there. They look in the hallway for the daughter-in-law's voice and find a sinister room. In one of the glass jars, they hear the girl's voice. She's present in this brain, shocking the main character when realizing that's what's left of her. If it wasn't the girl calling his name during these 10 years, he would have gone crazy. He didn't freak out thanks to her, starting to cry before the shocking discovery. He asks Sakuya if it's possible for her to regenerate, until she's back to normal. The boy says that it took him 10 years to regenerate from his head, and that he doesn't know how long it would take her, but it would be possible, yes, for her to regenerate. Our hero promises to protect her, and they leave that place. In the middle of the way, the main character asks why they're being captured, and Sakuya explains that it's because they're different. When humans find rare creatures like them, they want to study them. The main character asks how long the boy has been alive, and he doesn't remember, he just knows it's been a long time. He doesn't remember when he was human, but when talking to Makoto, he feels like in the time he was a human, watching the starry sky. Probably the daughter-in-law also had the same feeling as him. They get to the end of the tunnel and find themselves in the middle of a forest. Our hero raises the jar and tells the daughter-in-law that they're finally outside. They start to run away, but Sakuya ends up being hit. The main character doesn't give up on saving him and carries him in his arms, trying to escape from there. But the organization's people arrive in full force, even bringing a helicopter. The little boy says that it'll be hard for the main character to escape if he has to carry him. He tells our hero not to worry because he's always captured and always manages to escape, which has been happening for several decades. Then he pushes our hero and falls down there. The main character hears the daughter-in-law's voice calling his name and knows he must run away from there so they can stay alive. The little boy is captured by the soldiers and says goodbye, watching the starry sky, similar to what he saw when he was still human. Our hero keeps running away and gets to an old abandoned house. He decides to stop there to get some clothes. Very tired, he decides to lie down a little and rest, because he's pretty far from the place where he heard Yuki's voice. Sleeping, he remembers his mother and all his friends, wanting everything to go back to normal so he can live happily. When his life was starting to get better, all the bad things started to happen, making him pretty sad. Remembering Yukiko, he starts to cry because he liked her a lot. Some minutes later, he decides to leave because he had already rested, and runs to the place where he heard Yuki's voice. Going back to the place of that religion, we see that Yukiko is locked in a cell. In her mind, there are still those scary images of the believers attacking Yuki, and she can't stop thinking about that. The priest had devoured the brain, and everyone now believed they had become gods. The little boy even tried to save her, but they ended up capturing her. She cries a lot and apologizes to Yuki. If she hadn't tried to do something good, she would end up suffering. At that moment, the believers open the door to take her to the priest. They participate in an absurd ceremony, believing they are vampires and immortal. They start the finishing of the other members, believing they will be resurrected. Witnessing this, the girl is traumatized, and the priest orders them to bring her to him. He tries to replicate a painting in the church, making a cut on her with a straw. Drinking Yukiko's vital energy, he realizes that the taste is bad. Finding that he hasn't become a vampire, he freaks out and all the believers get scared. He cries, seeing his plan falling apart, wasting the only vampire he had. Enraged, he decides to finish Yukiko. About to hit her, she starts to wish that Makoto would save her. Triumphantly, he shows up in the last second, holding the priest's blade. Everyone is surprised by the turn of events. Masami freezes, seeing another vampire before his eyes. Yukiko can't believe that Makoto really showed up. Our hero is also surprised to see Yukiko hurt, and she cries, revealing that she's been looking for him all this time without giving up. The priest tries to attack our hero, but he dodges. Confused with the situation, the main character asks where Yuki is, hearing his voice inside the priest. Masami reveals that he and the believers devoured a vampire to become gods, but it didn't work. He asks our hero to bite him and turn to him for real. The main character kicks him in the stomach, throwing him far away, and he gets furious. He says he wants to live a quiet life with friends and family, not understanding why everyone wants to ruin his life. Masami insanely repeats the desire to become a god. While our main character hears his friend's voice inside Masami's head, Makoto jumps, knocks Masami to the ground, and he begs to be turned into a vampire. Yuki watches the scene without strength to help, hearing Yoki's voice asking our hero to finish Masami, guilty for all the suffering. Yoki apologizes for not having made it. Makoto cries, saying that he's the one who should apologize for not having saved his friend. Furious, realizing everything, he decides to take revenge. In a loud voice, he declares to be a vampire and will end everything. Furiously, he bites Masami, about to transform. He can see the daughter-in-law who is in the main character's backpack, the vampire that had attacked his sister, being happy and praising her beauty. However, the main character manages to finish him, shocking everyone. Having finished Masami, Yuki is released in spirit form, and manages to say goodbye to Makoto. He thanks him and says that now he can finally leave in peace, disappearing little by little, and saying goodbye to our hero. The main character goes to Yukiko, and they meet again after 10 years. The girl didn't give up on finding him and finally managed to find and save him. Yukiko hugs him, saying that he's warm, and after that, she passes out. Opening her eyes, she's in high school, in the same hallway where she met our hero. He had brought a juice for them to drink in the break, handing it to her. They stay side by side, looking out the window for some minutes. She asks where he's been. He explains that he was captured, being trapped all this time, but only now he managed to escape. She invites him to go back home together because she'd like to be with him. However, our main character says that he can't do that, because he'd put everyone in danger. Even so, there were people waiting for his return. Even his mother left the door open every day for him to enter. But even so, he couldn't go back there. He gets up and says he has to go, but she'd like to hang out longer with him. Certainly he'd like to stay with her and her family, but that would put them all at risk. She grabs his uniform and says she needs him to stay, that she'd take care of him and provide food. She even starts crying desperately for him not to leave and leave her alone again. Then he reminds the girl of what she had taught him. She should look at the sky to relax her mind. When he does that, he'll remember her, and hopes she also remembers him. That was a goodbye, and he says goodbye to the girl, leaving. Yukiko stays crying, saying his name, but it's no use, and he leaves without her being able to do anything. She wakes up in the hospital next to that little boy, and Pseudo is present. Their concern is evident because she was screaming as if she was in a nightmare. Then they explain the situation that took them to the hospital. When Pseudo gets up, he faces the girl in Makoto's arms. Desperate, she asks where he is. However, Pseudo says that after bringing them to the hospital, he left as fast as possible. Curious, she also asks about the fate of the other members of the religion. The little boy present explains that everyone followed the priest's step, being dragged upwards, and that became headline in all the newspapers. The only survivor is the little boy, and she decides to take care of him in thanks for having saved them. Pseudo proposes that they go back together to the city, and she agrees to go with him. Until now, the story has been exciting. If you don't want to get even more emotional with the ending, I recommend stopping here. 5 years pass, and we see Makoto's mother buying a birthday cake. When saying that it's her son's birthday, the attendant congratulates her. Arriving at home, she lights 3 candles and positions a picture frame with our hero, saying that today he turns 30. Her brother sends a message to the parents congratulating their little brother's birthday, highlighting that he's now entering his 30s. The lady's granddaughter is growing and getting ready to start kindergarten, sharing the news with Makoto in the photo, and together they toast. However, at night, while she was sleeping, our hero passes by to check on his family. Mother's instinct doesn't fail, and she wakes up feeling something strange. Checking, she finds a note next to the cake, thanking and asking to take care. We also see a bite mark on the cake, saying that our hero is there. Discovering the message, the mother runs outside, emotional, and starts to cry, congratulating her son on his birthday. Next we pass to Wednesday, finding Pseudo in the hospital, visibly anxious. The little boy is now a teenager and goes with him to the hospital next to Yukiko's mother. She's in labor and seems happy to have overcome challenges, building a family. The baby's born, it's a little boy, and she's happy seeing him. Everyone celebrates the arrival of the new child, and Pseudo congratulates his wife for the effort, recognizing her good work. Yukiko thanks him, emotional. Then she stays contemplating her little son, admiring this cute creature. Some time passes, and we see our hero on top of a pole. We show how he feeds over this period, finding a person, tying her, and without causing great damage, taking the food in jars to consume, without turning her into another vampire. He gives some food to the daughter-in-law, who is regenerating. 5 years have passed, and she's still in this stage, taking a long time to fully recover. The main character releases the victim, apologizes, and then walks away. Several years pass, and Yukiko's family grows. Her mother gets old, and her granddaughter's already pretty big. The boy who was part of the religion gets a job. Sakuya escapes from the organization, thanking our hero. Yukiko's son grows, attends school, enters high school, then college. Yukiko is much older. After some years, her mother dies of old age. Her older brother cries, mentioning that she met her father, asking them to keep taking care of Makoto, her youngest brother. Meanwhile, much more time passes. Pseudo has already passed away, and Yukiko, now very old, is hospitalized. The nurse says that she's looking good, eating well. Yukiko says that she's happy, and we see some origamis made by her great-grandchildren. Even after all the bad things that happened, she had a happy and satisfying life. Holding the origami, she looks at the window. She sees Makoto, our hero, on top of a tree. Happy, she smiles and asks if he came to visit her, highlighting that it's been a long time since they last saw each other. She makes a goodbye gesture and the boy leaves. That was a farewell. Even though the ending was happy, there's that bitter feeling. To conclude this magnificent work, allow me to present the captivating flashback of the daughter-in-law. She was born in an ancient era, where humans still lived in tribes, and she shared her life with loving parents and little brothers. Since young, she had feelings for a boy, fueling the hope of living eternally next to her great love. However, the village in which they lived had a unique peculiarity. Monthly, they held an unusual draw, and the daughter-in-law ended up being chosen. Learning about this, the boy is stunned, while his parents, in a respect for the village's tradition, remain silent. Being drawn, the boy visits her to say goodbye, and she bursts into tears saying goodbye. The next day, very early, she climbs the mountain, facing several obstacles until reaching the top, where she finds the entrance to a cave. Chosen as a sacrifice for a vampire, she enters the cave. The vampire attacks, but noticing the girl's tears, surprisingly decides to spare her, going against the local rules. In the dark universe where it was strictly forbidden to leave survivors, the vampire faced an internal dilemma when coming across the girl. This hesitation reveals that even among dark beings, compassion still finds space. Regaining consciousness, the girl realizes that something terribly wrong has happened. Returning to her village, she faces relentless rejection because everyone knows what she has become. With no choice, she is forced to live on the fringes of society, diving into a narrative marked by exclusion. This story portrays the cruel reality of being forced to live isolated from society without having chosen the destiny that afflicts them. Wandering alone for years, the daughter-in-law finds on a fateful day the young Makoto. Attacking him, a wave of memories invades her, referring to her old love because he and Makoto are remarkably similar. As supposedly being the first vampire after the one who transformed her, she passes on the gene of these memories, making any being who faces Makoto feel a glimpse of humanity. Facing the main character and remembering her old passion, she sees herself unable to finish him. After that, our hero wakes up next to her, finally fully regenerated. The time it took to reach this current stage remains a mystery. It could have been decades or even hundreds of years. He confided to her that he was immersed in a dream and that they were good dreams. The smile lights up the girl's face, and happiness also floods his face, realizing to be next to her. The night had already fallen, allowing them to leave the cave. She takes his hand and together they emerge to the outside. There's a saying that says that we only die when our existence is forgotten by other people. Therefore, Makoto decides to take with him the memories of everyone he loved. Next to the daughter-in-law, he walks, living in his mind all the people who were part of his life. He ensures that he will never forget anyone, and highlights that one of the people who most marked his life was Yukiko. She, who never abandoned him, was looking for him during all the years of his life. Hand in hand with the daughter-in-law, he heads towards an endless world. That way, the story of happiness comes to an end. It was really hard to make this video, so if you liked it, leave your like and comment. I'm going to leave here as a suggestion 2 videos that I'm sure you'll like. See you later, folks!